amidst the roar of the battlefield. Both sides, Muslims and Christians, face each other with a firm determination. The fierce fight between the Eastern and the West became a prevalent sight. Saturate history with heroic and tragic stories. Behind the romanticism and the rhetoric of religion, Crusades were a reflection of a cruel colonization, and brutal for almost 2 centuries. Violence and gunfighting be the backbone of the conflict that took thousands of lives and destroy the territories involved. Traces of hatred and hostility inherited by Crusades were still felt centuries later. In that long period, the world witnessed a wave of destruction, and conflicts that destroy relationships between nations left a deep wound in the history of mankind. Other than the Crusades, the Islamic world also had to face brutal attacks from the Mongols that struck their lands. This invasion resulted in massive damage, including the collapse of the Abbasid dynasty in the Baghat. Add to the tragedy and the suffering that Muslims are going through, though many battles have passed, and many considered that the Crusades were over. But the impact is still acidic. Presence of evicted Christian forces and threats from the Mongols showed that this conflict still burns beneath the surface. Although on a smaller scale, war and conflict continue to plague the region. Who were involved in the Crusades? Both sides continue to fight, even though in a lower frequency, show that the continuity of the conflict still be an important issue in the future. Only when Constantinople fell to Turkish troops and the last pope's support for the crusade vanished, conflict ended. Victory of Sultan Muhammad al-Fatih marks the end from the era of the long crusades, although the marks are still felt today. In a clearly written historical record, failure of the Crystal Army in winning the crusade become irrefutable evidence. Although it has involved great resources and manpower, their efforts failed to achieve the expected victory. Cause deep questions about the effectiveness of the strategy. Their war, not only in terms of military strength, but also from an ideological point of view, the crusade failed to achieve its goal. Despite the Christian invaders trying hard to conquer and change the beliefs of Muslims, they didn't manage to shake confidence firmly in their religious teachings. Ironically, the attempt at subjugation and Christian influences precisely strengthen the loyalty of Muslims to their own religion. Attack waged by Christian forces, it has become a trigger to strengthen the belief and spirit in defending the teachings of Islam. In the long course of history, the Crusades had brought about great changes for Muslims. Awareness of the importance of uniting and maintaining their beliefs peaked, resulting in a strong rejection of Christian colonization, and eventually expelled Christian forces from their territories. Despite the rejection and strong resistance from the Muslims, the Crusades also gave impetus for the increasingly vigorous Christianity movement. Increasing number of churches and Christian followers show the impact, continuing from the conflict. After the long period of Crusades ended, the world faces a new chapter, known as the modern Crusades. This period was marked by political changes, profound economic and social, bring a more complex impact, and diverse for both parties involved. Europeans did not stop after the failure of the Crusade of Love. Instead, they came back with a new strategy, using political power and their military to expand the influence and control territories in the Islamic world. They wore new masks as colonizers, with the goal remaining the same: gain profits and dominion over the lands they annexed. The European colonizers, determined to subdue institutions in the Islamic world, including religion, political and social, to be used in accordance with their interests. They use a variety of ways and strategies to achieve this goal, including political intervention and cultural influence. One of the main strategies of European colonizers is to send troops, language to the areas that they want to rule. This troop consisted of scholars, missionaries, and political agents who served to transport, change, or even up the culture and the local language to fit the interests of the colonizers. Language troops. It operates in areas that European colonists deemed strategic, which are often cultural centers and politics in the Islamic world. They concentrate in the area, which is considered to have great potential for influence. and conquest, in Egypt and Syria, European language forces infiltrated under the guise of scientific delegates and the humanitarian mission. They founded a school, educational institutions, chapel church, and health clinics, running social programs, which aims to gain sympathy and expand their influence in those areas. Behind peaceful rhetoric and international diplomacy, Muslims have been aware of the presence of a movement that threatens the existence of and their beliefs, that the scent of modern crosses implies a real threat against identity and the sustainability of Muslims in the midst of a changing world. Victory of General Al-Ayyubi, although in a military context, has a deeper symbolic meaning. He viewed the conquest of Olive Mountain in the Al-Quds as the end of the Crusade. He said, "This was the end of the Crusade." Arrival of the French general, Henri Gouraud. Damascus is not just a military victory, but it is also a symbolic act, which points to the hidden agenda of the Western colonists. In his search for the tomb of Salahuddin Al-Ayyubi, he plotted deeper actions to tear down the identity and strength of Muslims. She said, "Wake up, you, O Salahuddin. This is us. The Crusaders have returned." Though there are efforts such as the United Nations to resolve conflicts in the Islamic world, we should not underestimate the basic nature of hostilities committed by the Western against Islam. Conflict and resistance to modern colonization is still going on. Show that the struggle of Muslims to maintain their identity and existence is still not over. Despite having experienced various oppressions and the division of territory by the Muslims, keep the spirit and their strong beliefs. The spiritual power of Islam remains alive, despite the trials and challenges continue to confront throughout modern history. There is a Christian effort to change the historical narrative and forget about crime, which was done during the Crusades. They attempt to erase the memory of the oppression and massacres committed against Muslims by performing various actions with a peace demonstration. Peace demonstration movement that started in Europe is an attempt to give the impression that the Christian side willing to apologize for past crimes. But it can also be considered as attempts to revise the history of and cover up traces of colonization, as well as crimes committed in the past. This demonstration started in 1996 in France, then resumed in Germany in 1997, followed by about 1,000 people. Most of them are Christians. Stereotypical views of people, Islam as a criminal has spread on an aggressive foreign policy, including military occupation of Islamic countries like Iraq and Afghanistan. Stigmatization of people, Islam as a terrorist, legitimized the attempted military invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. Buss' statement about the Crusade shows that his agenda is not just limited to national security, but also includes religious and ideological dimensions, which reinforces the narrative of conflict between the West and Islam. Bao leadership characteristics, who was influenced by his religious beliefs and his conservative political views, creating an atmosphere who support the conflict between the West and Islam. Christian organisasi in the United States have an important role in supporting foreign policy led by BUS, Sultan Baptist Conference, largest Christian Protestant organization in America, one of the BUS support organizations, and the Franklin Graham Organization, which is closely related to the Junior BUS.